Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Bloomington Rotary Club's weekly celebration of service. I'm Sam Udak, and I am honored to serve as your president-elect this year. I'm overjoyed to be a proud alumnus of the national champion Indiana Hoosiers. Please remember to silence your electronic devices, or at least turn them on vibrate. On this day in history, on January 20th, 1986, 3 years after the bill was signed into law, the United States celebrated its first ever National Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So, in honor of this holiday, I ask you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance if you're able. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And today, Carol Ann Hostler will deliver our reflection.
Good afternoon. On May 22nd, 1964, and due to the generosity of the rabbi at a synagogue in Westport, Connecticut, I met Martin Luther King Jr. and had a one-on-one conversation with him. I was 14, and as you can imagine, it was memorable. That said, that story requires more time. My reflection today centers on one aspect of my personal journey that resulted in my conversation with Dr. King. I had my first interaction with a Black person when I was about 8. I met Violet, a woman who worked for my grandmother. And I also remember, actually with some affection, George, a boy who was in my 4th grade class. He had gotten my name as a secret Santa, if you remember what that is. And that proved to be problematic for both of us because we were both teased. This reflection, however, focuses on April to October 1963. My family regularly attended an Episcopal church where the ministers routinely preached about the national news and the civil rights movement. I was in the children's choir, and I participated in a Saturday morning girls' club at my church that was led by a young woman who structured a portion of the club meetings, I think it was snack time, for more serious discussion. And I remember sitting around a table thinking and talking about the civil rights movement every Saturday morning. In 1963, Time magazine had a civil rights section, and I read that section first every week. CBS News anchor Harry Reasoner's daughter, Beth, was in my class at school. And Beth's father was always on TV reporting on Dr. King and civil rights. I always wanted to see what Beth's father was up to, so I watched CBS News every night. Monday through Friday, I was bombarded with the important struggles of the civil rights movement, struggles that seemed to me to be led by kids just my age. Lots happened from April to October 1963. In Birmingham, King was in jail, and there was the Children's Crusade. Medgar Evers was murdered in his driveway in Jackson, Mississippi. Black leaders began to make plans for the March on Washington, while white political leaders voiced concerns about safety and timing. As we all know, the March on Washington went off without a hitch, no violence. But then September 15th, 1963, my family had gone to church. I sang in the choir just like 4 other girls, Addie Mae, Denise, Cynthia, and Carol. Those 4 girls were my age, my sister's age, and the same ages as my cousins. Those 4 girls were murdered in the bombing at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. As I saw it, the similarities between those girls and me were numerous, but I was safe. My family was safe. The critical difference, skin color. That's when the civil rights movement became personal. That day, I recognized something for which there was not yet a label. Sunday, September 15th, 1963, was an aha moment for me. It's the day I acknowledged my own white privilege. Let me make this clear. I think it's important to recognize the past in order to understand the present and inform the future. With that acknowledgement, I've tried to educate myself and without any guilt whatsoever, journey forward to gain greater understanding and act as Dr. King would have us all do.
Thank you for that. Today, Hank Walter will introduce.
We seem to have lost connection on Zoom. If anybody can hear that in the room, in the Georgian room. Everybody in Zoom is frozen. Sam's frozen, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, it was my Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yes.
It's something's going on.
Yes.
Is that John, a blurry John Zodi we see? Is that?
Yes, sitting at the table.
Okay, did we just lose them entirely? Yeah.
Yeah.
What just happened? Okay, wait. Let me see what they're saying. Anything? No.
Here we go. You got some.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay.
Oh.
You have, and if not, I'll be there. Or someone from the membership committee will volunteer to be my guy. First, a guest of Don Hostler, Lange. And a guest of Carol Ann Hostler, Sherry Dupree.
Well, Sherry's there.
You know, I really like having the Zoom option, but I also really hope that someday we'll be together. Until then, Joy, do we have any guests online?
Hank, we do not have any guests, but we've been a rousing crowd of Hoosiers here online. Yeah.
Great, great. Well, thank you all for coming. Now, Sam, let's get it on.
Thank you for that, Hank. We have a few birthdays today. We have on the 20th, or coming up this week, I should say, we have past President Sally Gaskell, Len Tiemann, and Jonas Chang. We also have a number of Rotary anniversaries. 1 year, Katie Cerniak. Past club president and district governor Judy Witt, 37 years. Claudia,
Morgan.
yeah, absolutely worth a round of applause. Claudia Avellaneda, 2 years. Lori Garrity, 2 years. Katie Sensabaugh, 1 year. And Bill Brown, 5 years. We also have a few brief announcements. If you haven't done so already, please introduce yourself to our new club executive assistant, Mandy Stewart. Happy Dollar proceeds for the month of January, or for the months of January and February, will be given to Teachers Warehouse. The second phase of Meals on Wheels District Grant Project will take place tomorrow, January 21st. They have enough volunteers already, but you are still able to donate. There's handouts on the tables with lists of items they're accepting, including frozen vegetables, frozen protein, butter, margarine, etc. If you need further details, you can talk to Diana Hoffman. And finally, our club program chairperson, Michael Shermis, has a brief announcement regarding upcoming programs.
Germinator.
So once or twice a year, I get up you and say, we need ideas for our speakers to come in. And so feel free to get your camera out and make a click there. If you don't already have my email address, send me your ideas. Like we would love to have a talk on blank, whatever topic that might be. Send me your names. Here's a great speaker. This person would be really good for us to speak to us. And of course, your willingness to host and introduce is key. I wouldn't want to be getting up here introducing every speaker every time. We need you all to come up with the ideas and be willing to host and speak about them. So feel free to send me an email with all of your ideas, and hopefully we'll get another great lineup for the year forthcoming. So thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And finally, Patrick Smith will introduce today's speaker.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Charles E. Sykes. For 34 years, Charles Sykes served as Executive Director of Indiana University's African American Arts Institute. Under his leadership, the Institute's African American Dance Company, African American Choral Ensemble, and IU Soul Review helped foster the development of thousands of IU students while entertaining, educating, and inspiring diverse audiences locally, nationally, and internationally. An accomplished arts administrator, performer, educator, and scholar, he earned a BS from Florida A&M University, where he performed with the renowned Marching 100 and both MME and DME degrees from the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music. At IU, he held affiliate faculty appointments in African American and African diaspora studies and folklore and ethnomusicology. His research centers on African American popular music, particularly Motown records. He developed the nation's first Motown history course, contributed articles and chapters to several publications, and lectured throughout the U.S. and internationally. Now retired, he continues involvement with the Institute as its historian and as a research associate for IU's Archives of African American Music and Culture. He is a recipient of the Jerry Gunning Stroman Distinguished Inclusive Excellence Award presented by IU's Office of the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Please give a warm round of applause for Dr. Charles Sykes.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm a little hoarse today, as you can hear. I was not on Kirkwood last night. And unfortunately, I was not in Miami cheering the Hoosiers on. But I did spend some time yelling at my television. So thank you for having me. I'm going to talk about Motown. And let me share with you a couple of experiences that taught me to not say so much. I was at the University of Bahia in Brazil. And of course, I could not speak Portuguese. But I had a translator. And so I was talking and the translator, was telling the students what I was saying, and the students just sat there with this blank look. And then all of a sudden I played a song. That was a Motown song. So they said, oh, yeah, that's what he's talking about. So I learned from that is to not say so much, but, and with my students, showing the images that predated some of their parents and grandparents even. Can you believe that? Those images from years and years ago, and telling those stories through the sounds and of audio and video. So that's kind of what I'm going to do today. It's more of a show and tell. What inspired this topic? What is Motown? Where's my clicker here? So you remember Barry's Place? Barry's Place was open for many years. It was one of my favorite places. It's now closed on 3rd Street. And so Thursday nights was music night, live music night. They had jazz groups that would come in, sometimes R&B groups and so forth. So this one particular evening, there was a flyer, and it said this band was going to play jazz and Motown. So of course, I was developing my course at that time, so I went to the show. And the band played quite well, but there was no Motown. So the leader of the group said, okay, we'll stay for the second set because we're going to play some Motown. So I sat there, and the band played well, but there was no Motown. So it was very clear to me that this band did not know what Motown is. They played some R&B, but there was no Motown. So in my syllabus, one of the first things that you will read is what is Motown, so that people don't have these misconceptions about it. So that's kind of what I'm going to do today. And let's start with a song. And that is the Motown sound. There we go. Motown is a record company founded in 1959 by a Detroit native, Berry Gordy Jr., in the city of Detroit. It was a company that specialized in rhythm and blues, which some people called rock and roll at that time. Motown recorded many different kinds of music, but rhythm and blues was what they specialized in. The sound of Motown was upbeat, cool, urban, with stories about young love and relationships, and a sound that was uniquely Detroit. Berry Gordy sold his company in 1988, and even though Motown still exists, though under other ownership, the legacy that was built in Detroit back during the 1960s in particular was what established Motown's legacy. I use this outline to talk about the history of Motown. Those first few years in Detroit where they were just trying to figure things out. And then there's classic Motown, the period from 1964 to 1967. This is when the Motown sound was solidified. The last years of the Detroit era, 1968 to 1972, the sound changed. And that change occurred in conjunction with the changes that were happening in society. The death of Martin Luther King, or the assassination of Martin Luther King, was one of those events that triggered a different kind of a groove, a different way of thinking about things, and thus a different way of expressing what people were feeling at that time. In 1972, Motown moved to Los Angeles. And with that move brought about different experiences, new people, and then venturing into television and movies. The first song released on what would be a part of Motown was not on Motown, but it was on Tamla. That was the first label in 1959, Mark Johnson's song, Come to Me. By the end of 1959, Berry Gordy started the Motown label, and although the first song was not released until 1960, he established that as a second label that would become part of Motown Record Corporation. Just like General Motors has its Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, and they used to have Oldsmobile. Some of you may remember that, right? And they made Pontiac, right? And GMC trucks. Motown had its Tamla, its Motown, its Gordy, its Soul, and many other labels. As a matter of fact, by the end of the Gordy era of Motown, there were 19 labels established. Right? Here's a few more here. The Divinity label was sacred music. The Workshop Jazz, of course, was jazz music. But those four labels at the top were the ones that you would hear those hits. Like, for example, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, Heat Wave was on the Gordy label. And I came across this. I was doing my research years ago, and I visited Central Michigan University, and I came across this brochure, which I'm not sure that Motown used to sell records, but they used this brochure to get business, all the different kinds of things that they would need in order to operate their record business. This brochure, the wording in it, talks about Motown recording country music, some classical music, which is kind of debatable, but there were some recordings of the strings playing Motown recordings. They talked about rhythm and blues, rock and roll. So this brochure kind of tells us that Motown was quite diverse in what they did during the Gordy period, but that rhythm and blues was the center of what they would do. I don't know how many of you have been here, but this little house and a couple of houses attached together, that's Hitsville, USA. This is where many other recordings like you heard earlier in the evening, and that like you will hear with me, were recorded in this little space. Here is the studio where those things were recorded. So if you have not been there, do take some time to go to the Motown Historic Museum, which still operates with some of the things, some of the equipment, some of the instruments that were used years ago in that space. It's a lovely, lovely journey through history. Most people in Detroit had the opportunity, or during the period that we're talking about, to work for the auto industry. Berry Gordy was one of those people. He worked on an assembly line for the Mercury company. And from that experience, he was inspired about what he wanted for Motown. And let's hear him tell that story.
Mr. Gordy, you created the name Motown from Motor City, right? Detroit. Okay.
Right.
It's been said that you modeled what happened at Motown after an automobile assembly line.
I noticed the way the beautiful brand new cars would start out as just frames and end up brand new spanking cars. And I wanted the same thing for Motown. I wanted an artist to come in the front door, an unknown, and come out another door a recording artist.
A shiny new car.
A shiny
New recording artist.
and star.
Smokey Robinson was one of the first employees of Motown. Smokey Robinson and his group, which were known as the Miracles. And so Smokey was a writer, artist, producer, and had some administrative duties as well. So let's hear what he has to say about Berry Gordy's vision.
When we first started Motown, we had 5 employees, and he said, we're going to make music with a great beat, with some great stories. And that's what we did. We made music with a great beat, with some great stories. He said, our stories are going to be such that anybody can listen to them. They will not be offensive. And we're just going to make music. Eventually, he adopted the slogan, the sound of young America, because that's what we were.
That idea of anybody can listen to it was the key to Motown's success. Motown, more than any other record company at that time, was able to sell across racial lines. Keep in mind that in 1959, the Civil Rights Act had not been passed. Keep in mind that in 1964, when we came up with the Motown sound, the Civil Rights Act had just passed, but we still had a way to go. So this idea of creating music that everyone, it doesn't matter what age and what the color of your skin is, was what Motown wanted to do, is to create something that would bring people around the world together. And as I travel various places, when people may not know the history of Motown, but when they hear that name, Motown, and especially when they hear the music. Here's a little bit of Smokey Robinson. There are many groups and solo artists who recorded for Motown. I have a book, I didn't bring it with me. It's about this thick. There are thousands and thousands of songs. The book does not tell you how many, and I have not bothered to count them. But the songs that were recorded on Motown-owned labels, both in the US and in the UK. In the UK, there was the Tamla Motown label. You talk to people in the UK, they have no idea what Motown is in terms of a business, but they talk about Tamla Motown. These are some of those classic male groups. One of the things about Motown is that it's a group concept. So it took this tradition of vocal groups and sort of shaped that into the main sound of Motown. Seldom would you hear a Motown recording, even with a single artist, without background vocals. So that idea of group harmony was very important with Motown. I'm just going to show you some of the other groups, Martha and the Vandellas, who were my favorite, and of course the Supremes and the Marvelettes, Please Mr. Postman, you might remember that. Some of the solo artists, Marvin Gaye, of course, Mary Wells, My Guy, and Stevie Wonder. I was born in Little Rock, had a childhood sweetheart. Uptight, everything is all right. Very Strong recorded the song Money, That's What I Want. Sometimes people say that's a Beatles song. Yes, it was a Beatles song after Motown recorded it. Motown's was a culture created by the producers who are also songwriters. So the producers were in charge of working with the groups to come up with songs that would be appropriate for them. And of course, that would be hits. These are just some of the producers. Smokey Robinson was one. And that group, Holland Dozier Holland, wrote and produced that first song that you heard by Martha and the Vandellas. What solidified Motown, because there's different sounds. Each producer had its own, or his or her. There was only one female producer. I'll talk about that later. But each one had their own approach and their way, what they wanted to accomplish with each group. So you had all of these various songs, but there was one thing that solidified it as being the Motown sound, and that was the band. They called themselves the Funk Brothers, and the young lady, that's Martha Jean. She was not a funk brother, but she was a DJ that you see on this picture. But the Funk Brothers solidified the sound of Motown. Artist development. Berry Gordy wanted his artists to come into one door, you know, crude which was what Maxine Powell called them, and leave through another door and become a star. And what helped that was artist development. Charlie Atkins was a choreographer, and this young lady who I had the pleasure of spending hours with, Maxine Powell, was the image developer. And we'll get a chance to hear her voice.
My name is Maxine Powell. I am a motivator and an image builder. I teach personal development and self-growth. I had a finishing school in Detroit that no one, I'm from Chicago, that no one has equaled today. And I opened up in 1952, before there was a Motown. And Mrs. Gordy, Barry's mother, took my course, personal development and self-growth. Esther Edwards, that has the museum, and her sister took my course. There was no Motown, you see. And I closed my finishing school. We became very friendly and opened a finishing school within Motown. And that is unique today. There's never been a finishing school, white or black, around the world in 2002, you see. And when I opened up in 1964, the finishing school, and the purpose was to help the artists become class and to know what to do on stage and off stage, because they did come from humble beginnings. Yes. Some of them from the project, and some of them were using street language. Some were rude and crude. You understand? But with me, it is not where you come from. Yes. It's where you're going. And I teach class.
Now,
class
which one of the groups was the most difficult for you to work with?
I don't have that. And I teach today. No one is difficult. Each person is a beautiful, unique human being. You came in the world somebody. So if you have a problem and you're acting negative, you have been conditioned by someone or some environment, because you came into the world, couldn't walk and couldn't talk, and you couldn't control even your body in any kind of way. So you have been conditioned by somebody. And I said to my students, allow me to help you unmask and become and realize and discover what a beautiful flower you are.
So you've worked with Martha Reeves and the Vandellas?
I worked with Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, the Supremes, Diana Ross and the Supremes, Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell, The Temptation, Smokey Robinson, and Stevie. But I didn't do anything for Stevie. He was always beautiful, you see.
Excellent.
Always
beautiful. You can imagine what it was like spending time with her. She came and visited my class, and in Detroit, I took her to lunch. And I didn't have very much to say. Right. So Motown is a sound, is a vision that Berry Gordy created from his experiences. And it's also a way of performing. How do you carry yourself on stage? how you move, and so forth. This idea of singing and making gestures that tell the story of the lyrics. That's very typical of Motown. Here are the Supremes in the song that they recorded in 1964, the first song that they recorded on the Ed Sullivan show. I'm sure that some of you don't know what that is.
I've been crying 'cause I'm lonely. For you, smiles have all turned to tears, but tears won't wash away the fears that you never ever gonna return. To ease this fire that within me burns, it keeps me crying, baby, for you. It keeps me crying, baby, for you. So won't you hurry? Come on, boy, and see about me. See about me.
Elegance was the goal for the female groups. Cool was the goal for the male groups. Here are the Temptations.
I know you wanna leave me, but I refuse to let you go. If I have to beg, plead for your sympathy, I don't mind, 'cause you mean that much to me. If you proud to beg, and you know it, please don't leave me, girl. Ain't you proud to plead, baby, baby, please don't leave me, girl. Now I've heard a crying man is half a man with no sense of pride. But if I have to cry to keep you, I don't mind weeping if you keep by my side. Ain't you crying a baby, sweet darling, please don't leave me, girl. Ain't you crying to please, baby, baby, please don't leave me, girl.
Temptations. The end of the Detroit era, things were different. Marvin Gaye was talking about what's going on. There were protest songs. Temptations, Cloud Nine, Don't Let the Jones Get You Down. The Supremes did Love Child, about an illegitimately born child, or the idea of not allowing yourself to get in that situation. I still love you, but I'm not going to do that. Message songs to the audience that they were performing for. Edwin Starr, War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. At the same time, Motown was delving into stage and screen activity. They started with this TCB, Taking Care of Business, featuring the Supremes and the Temptations. And Motown actually started moving to LA around 1968 and created another business called Motown Productions. At the same time, artists were getting older, the audiences were getting older, but there was a youth market that was tapped into using the Jackson 5, who really did not record in Detroit. They went directly to LA. LA, a new sound, new people, and we've already talked about the new ventures like movies and television and so forth. The LA sound was funky. They talked about, Rick James was noted for singing about sex and drugs, which would not be allowed back, during the day. The Commodores, Brick House. So these are some of the groups from that particular period of time. There were some of the Detroit artists who are still recorded. Unfortunately, we don't have time to listen to them, but the idea is that things were very different from what they were back in the day. Movies, movie soundtracks, of course, The Wiz and Lady Sings the Blues and others. If I were going to do a new writing project about Motown, I would call it The Other Motown. Because as I stated at the very beginning, Motown recorded many different kinds of music, but not just kinds of music, spoken word. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Motown artist. In 1963, there were 2 albums released. The first one came out of a march that occurred in Detroit, which was the very first version of the I Had a Dream speech. The second album was recorded in Washington, D.C., and it includes soundtracks from that event that we talked about earlier. So Motown was quite diverse. They were a part of American society in many ways, crossing the boundaries, bringing people together. And there is one picture that I have of a performance back during the 1960s with white people on one side of the room, Black people on the other side, and a rope down the middle. That was a part of the experience in the 1950s, and some of the Motown artists tell those kinds of stories. But Motown was able to help bring down that rope and gave us memories, memories of songs that they recorded have not gone away. At least I still talk about them and still enjoy listening to them. So I hope that you have more questions than you got answers from this little sharing. So thank you so much. Apologize again for my voice. It's but we'll get through it.
Dr. Sykes, I'm Sandy Keller with Sandy Vincent, and I collaborated with you and Portia Maltsby to process so many of these incredible Motown interviews way back in the day. And it is still my greatest privilege and the best project that I was ever allowed to be part of. And I just want to thank you for your work. I think that there were so many things that we heard about what it was like to hear a love story on the radio and how they came out of poverty. But what really changed me was the way that so much of their music was able to galvanize people to do something incredible, like create funding for a hospital. Is there an experience that you remember out of this music that surprised you, that made you feel like it was just incredible?
Well, there are many experiences. This is this music that's a part of my growing up. So I grew up with Motown, but I do want to share an experience that from an interview with a young lady who grew up. She's a Caucasian lady, and she says that she grew up in a family in a rural area on the East Coast, and her family was dysfunctional. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" Well, when my dad came home, the television went on, the bottle came out, and then the rest was all dysfunction. So she was very. I guess what she wanted to share with me is how Motown changed her. She said that same video that you saw, the Supremes on the Ed Sullivan Show, she watched that video and she said, that changed my life. So long story short, she developed, she was encouraged by that, seeing the beauty, seeing the positiveness of those ladies on television. And she eventually got her master's, and she's a writer. So that's one story that really touched my heart.
Christopher MG's got a question online.
Thank you, Professor Sykes. I had a question about the sound of Motown, which is very distinct, that bass playing. Give us a little sense of the musicians. They had their own version of Wrecking Crew that played on all those great records. And did they all move to Los Angeles then and played on those later records? I know them from the very early sounds and that bass playing especially. Is that James Jamerson? Sounds great.
Yes. When Motown left Detroit, the musicians stayed. James Jamerson went to LA, but could not adjust. He had some personal issues, but he did not make the adjustment to that LA environment. The sound that you hear with the Funk Brothers was truly a Detroit sound. Those guys played together in clubs, blues and jazz and so forth. So that sound was honed outside of the studio, right? But they didn't go to LA. So the Wrecking Crew is a totally different experience. That's a group of musicians who come together to do recordings for not just Motown, but many artists in the LA area, in that particular scene, yes. So that's it's a Detroit concept. That's a Detroit sound, yeah. Yes.
Okay. I would like to hear more about how the Institute became part of IU. What are the early days, some of the personalities that really make it happen?
The Institute was the vision of Herman C. Hudson, who came to IU in 1968, right? That same year that things were just blowing up. He started what was then Afro-American Studies. The Institute was a manifestation of Herman's love for the arts. He was not a player or singer. He was a person who appreciated talent. So he brought to IU a young professor by the name of Portia K. Maltsby, who was my mentor, and the reason why I developed the Motown chorus. And Portia started the IU Soul Review first as a student activity, and then by the second year, it became a course offered through Afro-American Studies. As the Soul Review developed, more and more students were involved, and they created the dance company because dancers were in the Soul Review, and they felt like they needed to give the dancers another outlet. Then came the choral ensemble the following year. So that's kind of how the Institute evolved. It has changed over the years as everything else around us has changed, but it has survived. And it's the only one of its kind in any institution in the US. It's one of the reasons why we should be proud of Indiana University. And it's why we should do all we can to sustain it, because it has been, in many ways, not just the performers who have come out of that program, but the teachers, the lawyers, the parents who have come from that program. So thank you for asking that question.
Charles, thank you so much for sharing with you your knowledge about Motown. I have kind of a broad question, but I'm interested in the talent base that Berry Gordy and his peers developed. Were most of them locally bred? Were they from Detroit? Did they come from all over?
Born or raised in Detroit.
Wow.
Detroit is so rich with talent. The people that you saw on the screen, they were either born in Detroit or moved or migrated. You think about the migration during the Second World War, during that period, right? Migrated from Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, those people, their parents, for one reason or another, one of those reasons might have been the opportunity to move to a place where they could make more money. The auto industry drove that migration to Detroit, right? So it was Detroit had a large Black population. And that in those communities and in those schools, those were breeding grounds. And in those churches, like Reverend C.L. Franklin, i.e. Aretha's father, those churches, those are the spaces where this talent was nurtured. And on the street corners, the producers, the writers, the singers, they sang in groups as little kids. The Supremes were the Primettes. The Temptations were the Primes. So and it's just a wealth of talent that came together and largely driven, at least in terms of the economic side of things, by the auto industry.
Again, thank you. This is great. This may be too far down in the weeds, but the Temptations autobiographical, Ain't Too Proud. Was there anything that you thought should have been included that was missed, or something that wasn't entirely accurate?
I have a problem. So, and even in my retirement, I've been involved in performance for so many years. I'll go to a show and I'll say, okay, why is that curtain late? So even in the context of trying to enjoy the show, I have an analytical mind, and there are things that have to be changed, I would say, to put on a show that's 2 hours long to capture 30 years of activity, right? You cannot duplicate that. So some of the things were out of sequence, right? Well, why did they they were saying that this happened? No, this happened first. Those are the kinds of observations. I've been to Motown the musical. I was fortunate enough to go to not opening night, but the next week in New York City. And it was wonderful. But here I am again saying that, now why did they do that? Well, it was because they have this audience in front of us, and we have only so long, right? We only have so much time to be able to tell this story, and we don't want them to be bored. So, yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Jim Sims has a question online. Jim?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm having trouble on my end with audio. However, hey, Dr. Sykes, how you doing, man?
Hey.
It is very, very good to see you. And thank you for your presentation. And many of our fellow Rotarians will know that I was one of your students back in the day. I think you remember that.
Back then when I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, my specific question, you mentioned how the Institute has changed along with some social changes over the years. And I guess my question with you, beginning with Dr. Hudson and the intent of not only the academic connections to the Institute and some of the classes, and how it was focusing on first generation and Black and minority students. How do you think today's climate and academic environment has changed, and how does it affect the Institute and that type of learning?
Do you have an hour or so to well, the first thing that comes to mind is that, as Joyce Benson, eloquently saying, everything must change, right? Things change over time. I guess what I'm going to do is sort of paraphrase your question and say that the Institute is still a vibrant part of Indiana University. it's helping people in different ways than back in those days. When the Institute started with, and I'm speaking of the IU Soul Review, the membership was almost 100% African American. And it was created as an effort to pull together, very similar to what Barry Gordy did, pull together this talent and give that talent an outlet while helping students find a home at IU, right? Creating an environment in which they could excel. But it also was accompanied by programs, financial aid, advising, and all of those other pieces that are part of student success. So the Institute was one of several things that were created to accomplish that goal, and that is to provide an opportunity for minority students to excel. Now, everybody who's a part of the Institute is not Black, and there are some people who are white, but there's also people from other countries, so it's a much more diverse environment. But I think that what remains is this opportunity or this situation in which students can come together, right, and learn from each other and touch each other. Performing arts does that. It forces you to be in a situation where you get to know people. You get to look at them in the face. You have to touch them when you're dancing. So the Institute serves that role from what I'm thinking about right now. We're in an environment in which we are locked into our own spaces and don't talk to each other. The Institute provides that opportunity. It provides a situation in which you must talk to each other, sing to each other, play with each other, right? So I don't know whether that answers your question, but there are many different angles, but I wanted to share that particular one.
Thank you.
All right.
About all the time we have for questions.
Did I go over?
No, you were right on time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Sykes, thank you so much for that presentation, for that fascinating Q&A session. We really appreciate you being here with us. Thank you. We just want to take a moment to thank today's volunteers as we wrap up. Our greeter, Katie Cerniak, our guest introducer, sorry, really cannot talk today. A fascinating set of guest introductions from Hank Walter, Patrick Smith for introducing our speaker, Joy Harder, our host on Zoom, Carolyn Hostler for a really meaningful reflection. Our reporter today, Kyla Cox-Deckard, our camera and mic operator, Michael Shermis, our photographer, Jeff Richardson, our executive assistant, of course, Mandy Stewart, and our Zoom and audio producer, Tyler Martin Nichols. Our next regular meeting will be on January 27th here in the Georgian Room. Dave Askins will tell us all about the local paper. Every place is somebody else's backyard. And Tyler, if you could please share the graphic of the four-way test. And then stand if you're able and join me. First, of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Second, is it fair to
all concerned?
Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Better friendships.
Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, is it fun? This concludes our meeting. Thank you.
Nice to find that. Nice to find it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, please.